Hi, Max. How are you?
Hi, Zibby. I'm well.
Max was smart to get to our conversation early, and then I messed everything up. And now, of course, I can't really even see him that well. But we're here today to talk about The Lost Shtetl by Max Gross, which is you, and that's the cover, but I have the advanced version. And this is in conjunction with the JCC's Florida Jewish Book Fest, which you will be attending, and you'll be in the panelist for their fiction forum, and that's really exciting. So this is a kickoff to that. And I'm excited to be with you. So let's talk about your book and welcome.
Thank you so much. I really hope I don't have any more frozen moments. I'm sorry about that.
No, that's
Unstable
okay.
connection.
Who knows? It could be mine. So Max, The Lost
Oh, and
Shtetl.
here is the actual book. I just got the, yeah. No, I was
Yay!
just showing this is the actual book. You have there's the actual book.
That's excellent. Very exciting. So can you
Uh,
please tell listeners what it's about?
yes, of the Lost Shtetl. It's about a Jewish village in it's remote, and it's so isolated that it is completely overlooked by the Nazis during World War II. And it's completely overlooked by the Soviet Cold War. And it is basically rediscovered in the here and now. So I've been describing it as a Yiddish brigadoon, like just reappearing after many years of anonymity. Or you could think of it as like an Amazonian tribe of Jews in the middle of the Polish forest. But that's basically the plot. And, it gets all sorts of, you know, clash of civilization when they are reintroduced into the modern world.
And how did you come up with this idea?
I'm kind of a big history buff, and I was reading a book about World War II, and in this book, I just had this very weird thought. I was like, there were so many shtetls in Eastern Europe, prior to World War II. Like, how is it that they all fell to this, horrible, war? Why weren't there any that sort of slipped through, like some, middle of nowhere kind of like, village? Why did they all sort of succumb to this? And, just this thought occurred to me, like, oh, well, maybe one did. I spent, a long time thinking about, like, it was an interesting idea, but a long time. How would it, realistically happen? Stories and time to sort of assemble that whole little.
Max, I keep kind of keeps freezing a little bit. But
Oh
sorry.
no! Oh
I know,
no!
just a little. So if I'm not answering, um, well, I heard how you were a big history buff, and you had to wonder, like, what if something had survived? How could one not have made it?
Mhm.
And your research. So, did you do any traveling to the actual places and have like a site that you imagined it to have been?
Well, I sort of created the province, so there was no. There was actually it was a fictional province, like in like Faulkner's Yoknepatawpha. I have my my own little fake province in Poland. I did visit Poland. I used to be a writer for the New York Post, and I was on the travel beat, which is a great beat if you can get it. And I convinced my editor, David Kaufman, to send me to Poland for just a travel story. And I was pretty deep into the book when I went, but I got to area. I did visit Auschwitz, and I did see a little bit of the countryside. But it was definitely a very interesting experience.
Yeah, I've been to Auschwitz, and that is it's really just haunting to even step foot there and think of everything that happened and all the rest. And I like this. I just
Yeah.
think your creativity is so great to sort of reimagine what would happen. And I love that like novelists in general are always like, what if, right? And then all of a sudden we have these amazing stories. And like now I can just get lost in your story of you're wondering what if, especially for this horrific period of time, right? What if more places had lived? It begs the question, like, what if everybody had survived? What would the world be like, right? And you just have to, I don't know. My mind goes there.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it's still is sort of crazy to think that it was such an all-encompassing everybody's life back
Yes.
then. You don't see too many events like that do that. And then actually, a friend of mine who just heard about the book told me about this. These Russians who had still been living under the auspices of communism. Like years later, he just sent me this story. I haven't looked at it yet, but I was like, well, I guess life could be, this is a case of, unbeknownst to me, of life imitating art, and imitating life and imitating art and all that stuff.
Oh my gosh. So how long did it take for you to write this book? What was your process like? And did you outline it first or what was it like?
Well, it's funny. When I first thought of the idea, I thought that it was going to take place in the 40s. Like I thought it was going to be like, something that, okay, they got missed and, they almost like they come out of the bomb shelter and like, what the hell happened while we were gone. And I thought more, well, why would they have just in 1946 or 1947, why then would they all of a sudden have like, woken up, and why in the 50s? And so it sort of, I was like, oh, you know what? It should take place now. It was just like a light bulb that went off in my head. And it was like, it could really sort of grapple with all of the contemporary problems that people face, and that are very much on my mind, and very much on, I hope, a lot of my readers' minds, stuff like that. And so I think that I really started going with the book when I started thinking about the characters. The main character, Pesha and Yankel, when they started forming in my eyes, I was just like, oh, well, let's sort of follow the whole story. Like, what would happen? The town gets rediscovered. The idea of them being missed by the Holocaust, that's like almost like, the starting point, but the real bones of the story should be, what's happening now when they are suddenly introduced to all of this history that just plops down in front of them. And, I had an outline, but I definitely strayed from it a lot over the course of writing it. I wrote the first draft a while ago. I finished the first draft in like something like late 2014. And, selling a book is a long process. There was a couple of years of that. But it also, there was a period where I was reworking it and rewriting it. That was also, I also had a son who's now 5. And so there were just a lot of like interruptions in the finishing of the book. But yeah, the process was, I started in like, I think I thought of the idea in like 2008, 2009, really started working on it in like 2010, 11, finished the draft in 2014, and then sat for 2 years. And then like in 2017, I was like, all right, I have to finish this. Worked out on a revised version. I had a very lovely lady named Michelle Brower, who's an agent, read a version of it, gave me her notes, and her notes were, very, very smart. And so I basically worked around those notes. And then, yeah, in 2017, I started pitching it to other, long story. Michelle switched agencies, all these other things, but I found David Vigliano, Nick Gianni, and Tom Flannery, my agents now. Nick is no longer with the agency. We wound up selling it up. But yes, that's the whole saga, more than you probably wanted to know.
No, I find that process so interesting. I really do. And how great that you stuck with it and didn't let it just stay as a file in your computer or whatever. I mean, to bring it out. I mean, I'm sure every experience, like having I have a 5-year-old son too. I have 4 kids, but he's my baby. And having kids changes also your perspective and adds, I feel, some depth to your writing. Like you just have a new perspective as if you did anything, if you had a new job or if you adopted a puppy or something. Anyway, so I'm sure that like just all these experiences can only help, in other words. So for anybody feeling bad that they have a thing on their desktop, they might get better with time. Who knows?
Absolutely. No, for sure. I mean, well, you know, if you have 4 kids, you know what it's like. I mean, like, my God, you can always to like, you know, because you have some crisis that has to be addressed right away with your child. So yes, I think it was Janet Malcolm who called it an infinitely postponable act, right? I'm glad that I finally got back to it.
That's so funny. Yes, my kid's urgent thing today is putting things on the wish list for Hanukkah. Mind you, it's, you know, obviously still October, and you know, why this is urgent now. We don't even know when Hanukkah is. I had to look it up today. So anyway, but yes, the urgency of kids' needs always trumps a beautiful paragraph that needs to be, you know, crafted carefully and all the rest. Amazing. So tell me how did you always know you wanted to be a writer?
Pretty much. Since I was a kid, I was always writing stories. My parents are both writers. My father was a mystery writer, and his most famous book, his most famous book does not have his name on it. His most famous book is The Verdict, which became a movie with Paul Newman, the early 1980s. But he wrote true crime, he wrote mysteries, he wrote, you know, he was a columnist for New York Newsday for 16 years, wrote for People magazine. And my mother was a writer and editor as well. She was one of the editors for T magazine, the Times Style magazine. So, you know, there were books everywhere in my house growing up. And it was like if you wanted to keep up, you really had to do your reading. You had to sort of do your homework, and you had to know what you were talking about, and you had to, you know, my parents were just not going to tolerate cruddy conversation. That was just not going to be in the. So, you know, I grew up a bit of a bookworm, and
Did you grow up? Did you grow up in New York? Oh, sorry, I cut you off now. Did you grow up in New York, or where did you grow up?
Brooklyn Heights.
Okay. Yep.
Brooklyn Heights, which is sort of Brooklyn, but it's kind of Manhattan too. But
it's not Manhattan.
I mean, look, I feel like I have great street cred saying that I'm from Brooklyn.
You do. You know, it's super cool.
But it's not. Okay, then I was there.
You have major street cred in the literary universe. You are like, you know, born and bred in like the heart of the New Yorker. So I give you credit for that.
But yes, so, you know, I grew up in Brooklyn Heights. Went to St. Anne's School. I don't know if it's
of course. Yep.
So, which was, even though it's called St. Anne's School, and it was a very, very hippy dippy place, it was surrounded by Jewish people. You know, everybody from the headmaster on down was Jewish. And, you know, it was always sort of a fascination for my parents as well as me, was like Jewish history, you know, the Holocaust, but also Jewish literature. You know, I remember as a kid going to this friend of my parents' house for the weekend. I guess they lived in like, you know, Cape Cod or something like that. And I was like about 12 years old at the time, finding Gimple the Fool on this person's shelf, you know, just on the little room that was my room for the weekend. I took it off. And it definitely was this, love at first sight moment. It was, a moment where I was like, oh my gosh, this is, and I feel like to a certain extent, the Lost Shtetl is my tribute to Isaac Bashevis Singer. But I mean, there were books everywhere. We were very interested in Jewish topics and Jewish books, but we were interested in all sorts of books too. I think Lost Shtetl is also my tribute to Gabriel Garcia Marquez, who, 100 Years of Solitude is one of my favorite books. And Macondo, the town there, was very much a model for Kreskel in a lot of ways.
Well, your parents must be very proud of you. They must be belling and, excited. So I was thinking.
I think that they would, yes, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
But I don't think that they will have figured out how to get on Facebook. So maybe they'll watch it.
Well, I'm sure this is like one of many appearances you'll be doing, so I'm sure they'll catch something along the way.
Okay, for sure.
When you were saying, I grew up and there were books everywhere, how could I not be a writer? I'm just like crossing my fingers that one of my 4 kids might actually want to write someday and say, I'm imagining Zoom, 2030 when one of them says, well, I grew up with a lot of books around. And I'll be like, yes. I did something good.
I think it's the best way, just put them in the room with the books and they'll get it. They'll take it up by osmosis or something.
Exactly. Yeah, I'm hoping that happens. It doesn't seem to be working, but whatever. I won't give up. What happened between St. Anne's and the New York Post and the book? What else in your day job life, or what happened writing wise aside from those things? Or was that it? Was it college to the?
No, actually, after college, I went to Israel for a year. I went to a very not Jewish college. I went to Dartmouth College,
okay,
which is a wonderful school, but it was and actually I was talking about this to a reporter, Emily Barak, last week. Was I definitely think that there are traces of being left alone in the wilderness that sort of gave me some inspiration for this book. But when I graduated, I applied for graduate school, and I always wanted, as I said, I always wanted to be a writer, and applied for graduate school. I got into an MFA program in Columbia for film. Actually, I was going to do screenwriting. I think I was sort of sick of academia. I was like, I had been in school my whole life, and I sort of was a little exhausted with just that whole structure. And I thought, something more interesting with the next year. I don't know what it'll be, but and then I decided, there was this program in Israel, and I don't think it exists anymore, called the Arad Arts Project, which was basically you sit and you work on your art, whether it's painting or music or writing. And it's out in Arad, which is near Beersheba, in the desert in Israel. And I went for a year. It was supposed to be 7 months, and I wound up spending an extra 5 months there. And it was a very formative experience, just because I was sort of on my own in a completely different country, talking to people who had, completely different experiences from me, and very, very sharp perspectives. When you're in Israel, you could speak to Arabs, you could speak to Jews, and they live together, and they live in the same, under the same tent, and it's so starkly different. And that was a great experience, despite the fact that I was there during the Intifada, and it was a lot of pain, but it was nevertheless something that I feel very much formed me. And then when I came back, I worked at the Forward newspaper for about like 3 or 4 years, which, used to be the Yiddish forward. And then about like 20 years ago or so, maybe a little bit longer than that, they had an English version of it that they formed. And that was a great experience. I mean, I was actually talking about this recently as well. Just when you work at like one of these like local newspapers, first off, there are so many people who like call you because you're the only person that they can call to like sort of tell their stories. And I had the lowest job on the totem pole in the sense that I was like answering the phone. So I was getting like, all the phone calls from every disgruntled person who just wanted to tell me about their evil landlord or about their, the implants that their dentist was putting into their teeth. The real stories. Somebody did call me to tell me that. And I used to actually get calls from the widow of Ingrata, who was a Yiddish poet, who was, one of the real, luminaries in the world of Yiddish literature. Call me to yell at me every time the forward mentioned Isaac Bashevis Singer, who she regarded as the worst writer who ever lived and who had done such shame onto the Jewish people. And it was really right out of Cynthia Ozik's story, this whole experience. And it was a great experience. I mean, I was, talking to just people who were, who had a lot to say and who had great stories. And that was also very good. And and then I went to the New York Post, which was a great gig. I was, working at the home section, the real estate section. But I was also just writing a lot of food stories. And then because the travel desk was right next to the real estate desk, whenever the travel editor would go, on trips, he would ask us to write his headlines and his captions. And to thank us, he would send us places. So he'd be like, okay, well, we have this trip to Italy coming up that we need written about. Do you want to go, Max? Terrific. That's wonderful. And then when he left, this was an editor named David Lansell, the powers that be at the Post were just like, well, we have to figure out who we're going to hire to be the new travel editor. So until we figure that out, you guys, take care of it. And so we were like, okay, fine. We know what we're doing. After a couple of months, they were like, well, you guys are doing fine. We don't need another travel editor. You're just going to. So it became travel and real estate and food, which was a great job.
Wow. And do you have like a day job now, or are you mostly committed to being a novelist, or what?
Well, I'm definitely committed to being a novelist. And the thing that I learned when my son was born, that I could only really get away with doing it if I am committed to waking up before 6 a.m. every day to actually get a few pages out there. But no, I'm actually the editor of a real estate magazine, a commercial real estate magazine called The Commercial Observer, which is in its way also an extremely interesting gig, just in the sense of the real estate community is almost this like shtetl of billionaires to a certain extent. like the people who sort of own New York, there are so many crazy people in that list. But I've met most of them, and they're and they've all got like these incredibly strange, bizarre stories that go with them. So I don't know. I don't know what my next book will be, but I think that'll be influencing it.
Wow, the Shtetl of billionaires. That's a cool title too.
Shtetl of billionaires. I have to trademark that right now.
Yeah, I have my little team doing, getting the trademark while you're hearing. No, I'm kidding. I don't even really have a team. I have a tiny team. Anyway, so what are you working on next? Do you have another novel in the works?
I actually, I don't know if I'm allowed to really talk about it because I think that Harper owns me body and soul for the next. for the next 60 days or something like that. I'm not sure that I'm allowed to speak of that. But one of the things that the long process has allowed me to do has been to just go on to the next thing. So I have been working this whole time on new things, and I definitely don't want to wait so long before the next thing comes out. So there are a couple of different things that could be that could be the next thing. I'm working on all of them at the moment.
Wow. Well, I feel like you're going to be this is just the beginning for you of like your lifetime of talent in this area. And it's very exciting to see when like someone's debut and where it's going to go from here. And I don't know, it's just very cool. And now I love knowing that like this green cover is all about Dartmouth, which is like, who knew?
You're not an alumnus, are you, Zibby? No.
No, I went to Yale. Although
Oh.
I did spend a week at Dartmouth doing a tennis camp when I was in high school. So I feel like I can say I went to Dartmouth, right? No.
I feel like I could say I went to Yale because before I went to Dartmouth, the summer class.
Great. So actually we did all our schooling together, as it turns out.
Schooling together.
But I had tons of friends who went to Dartmouth, and I feel like I had my former sister-in-law, and I've spent a lot of time there. So then my ex, but anyway, whatever, I won't go into it. But yes, I've spent a lot of time up at Dartmouth, so I know that feeling of being in the woods, and I could imagine being lost there in a community all unto yourself. So anyway, well, do you have any advice to aspiring authors?
Well, I mean, one of the things that I will say was I made like a resolution in late 2016, like, I am going to finish this. Like, I don't know what is going to happen to it, but this is going to be as, the good a piece of work as I can do. I am going to not stop every day until this thing is finished. And I would wake up at 5 a.m., when my like, only to work and I feel like there's real finishing something, and I'm going to take something to completion and not, I'm not going to just have a good idea, and I'm not just going to, throw some things on the page. Like, I am really going to think about it as a complete thing, and I am going to work at it every day. And it took a lot of time, but it paid off. So my advice would be get up early, or I will work better at night. But I personally work better in the morning. Me
too. Yes, those morning hours before the kids wake up are sacred.
Me time. Yes.
Well, congratulations again on your book, and I hope you have a great time at the JCC Book Fest, the Jewish Book Fest. It's so great you're going to be there, and for all your upcoming stuff, I'll be rooting for you. So good luck.
Thank you, Zibby. And I'm sorry. I hope it was just that one thing that, I was frozen. I apologize.
It's not your fault. It's technology, and this happens all the time. And there was in and out, but this will be a podcast on Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books as well eventually. Not too long, but, not today. And I will take out all the bits and pieces that were not perfect, and we will make it sound like we had no trouble at all when it's on the podcast. So
I love it.
So there's that.
There's that. Great.
All right.
Well, Zibby, thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
No problem. And sorry again for the beginning introduction of stress.
No worries.
Okay.
All right.
Now, yeah. Okay. Bye-bye.